In the vast darkness of space, where civilizations rise and fall like distant stars, there exists a universal truth that every species learns too late. When you're truly desperate, when your back is against the wall and extinction stares you in the face, you don't get to choose who answers your call for help. The Zilani thought they were calling for diplomats. The Karath expected negotiators. The Vextai hoped for peacekeepers. What they got was something far more terrifying and infinitely more effective. They got humans who had heard the screams across the void. They got Marines who didn't ask questions first. They got a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of controlled violence in service of those who couldn't protect themselves. When the smoke cleared and the enemy lay broken, the galaxy would learn a lesson that would echo through the stars for generations. Never mistake human compassion for human weakness. Because when humans say they're here to help, they mean it with every fiber of their being, even if it means walking through hell itself to keep that promise. This is the story of what happens when the galaxy's most peaceful species made a desperate plea for assistance, and humanity's Marines emerged from the smoke with an answer written in fire and steel. Ambassador Kira Th's delicate fingers trembled as she activated the emergency broadcast beacon. The crystalline walls of her diplomatic chamber shook violently as another explosion rocked the Zilani homeworld of Thesha Prime. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see the orange glow of fires spreading across the capital city's elegant spires, each one a testament to the brutal efficiency of the Karn invasion force. This is Ambassador Kira Th of the Zilani Republic, transmitting on all emergency frequencies. She spoke into the quantum communicator, her melodic voice strained with desperation. Our world is under attack by Karn raiders. We are a peaceful people with no military forces capable of defending against this assault. We formally request immediate assistance from any spacefaring civilization willing to provide humanitarian aid. The Zilani had always prided themselves on being the galaxy's premier diplomats. For over 3,000 years, their species had resolved conflicts through negotiation, mediation, and cultural exchange. Their homeworld was a sanctuary of learning and art, where weapons were displayed only in museums and violence was considered a primitive relic of their distant past. Kira Th paused the transmission as another tremor shook the building. The Karn were methodical in their destruction, moving from district to district like a plague of locusts. They took what they wanted, destroyed what they couldn't carry, and left nothing but ash and sorrow in their wake. The ambassador had seen the reports from the outer colonies. Entire settlements burned to the ground, families separated, children orphaned. The Karn showed no mercy, no restraint, no hint of the civilization that supposedly separated sentient beings from mere beasts. We have no weapons to offer in trade, no military technology to bargain with, she continued, her voice breaking slightly. We can only offer our gratitude and the promise that the Zilani people will never forget those who answered our call in our darkest hour. As she prepared to end the transmission, a new explosion, much closer than the others, sent her sprawling across the polished floor. The lights flickered and died, leaving her in the eerie glow of the emergency power cells. In the distance, she could hear the distinctive whine of Karn atmospheric fighters strafing the government district. Please, she whispered into the communicator, no longer caring about diplomatic protocol or proper channels. Someone help us. 3 systems away, aboard the human colony ship Meridian's Hope, communications officer Sarah Chun picked up the transmission during her routine monitoring shift. The universal translator worked overtime to convert Kira Th's melodic Zilani speech into English, but the desperation in her voice needed no translation. Captain Morrison to the bridge, Sarah called over the ship's intercom, her training keeping her voice steady despite the urgency she felt. The Meridian's Hope was a civilian vessel, part of the human colonial expansion program. They carried families, scientists, and engineers seeking new homes among the stars. They weren't equipped for combat, but they had something almost as valuable, a functioning long-range communications array. Captain James Morrison arrived on the bridge within minutes, his graying hair disheveled from sleep. At 62, he had served 30 years in the Earth Defense Force before transitioning to civilian command. He knew the sound of genuine distress when he heard it. "Play it back," he ordered, settling into his command chair. As Kira TH's plea filled the bridge, Morrison's expression grew increasingly grim. The Zilani were known throughout human space as peaceful traders and skilled diplomats. Many human colonies had benefited from Zilani mediation services during territorial disputes. The idea of these gentle beings under attack stirred something protective in the veteran captain's chest. "Sir, I'm picking up multiple responses to the Zilani distress call," Sarah reported, her fingers dancing across her console. "The Altarian Confederacy is offering to send a diplomatic mission. The Centauri Assembly wants to convene an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The Rigelian Trade Federation is proposing economic sanctions against the Karn." Morrison's jaw tightened. Diplomatic missions would take weeks to organize. Council sessions could drag on for months. Economic sanctions were useless against raiders who lived by theft and piracy. Meanwhile, innocent people were dying. "Any military responses?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Negative, sir. The nearest Altarian defense fleet is engaged in training exercises 6 systems away. The Centauri won't mobilize their forces without a full council vote. Everyone else is either too far away or claiming they don't have the authority to intervene." Morrison stood and walked to the main display, which now showed a star map of the local sector. Thesha Prime was marked in red, indicating the distress signal's origin. The human response was predictably swift and decisive, but it wasn't what anyone expected. "Sir, incoming priority transmission from Terra Command," Sarah announced. "Admiral Richardson is requesting immediate real-time communication." The main screen flickered to life, revealing the weathered face of Admiral Elena Richardson, commander of the Sol System Defense Force. Her steely gray eyes held a mixture of determination and barely controlled anger. "Jim, I need you to relay a message to every human vessel in the sector," she said without preamble. "Tell them to stay clear of the Thesha system for the next 72 hours. Admiral, the Zilani are requesting humanitarian assistance." "Surely we can. We are providing assistance," Richardson interrupted. "But not the kind anyone expects. I've just ordered the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force to deploy from their training exercises in the Vega system. They'll reach Thesha Prime in 18 hours. Morrison felt his pulse quicken. The 3rd MEF was one of humanity's most elite military units, specializing in rapid deployment and asymmetric warfare. They were the Marines who had ended the Proxima Rebellion in 3 days, who had rescued the Kepler colony from raider attacks, who had earned humanity's reputation as the galaxy's most effective military force. "Admiral, the Zilani requested humanitarian aid, not a military intervention. They're pacifists. They might not understand. They will," Richardson said firmly. "Because by the time we're finished, they'll be alive to learn. The Karn picked the wrong species to target. They're about to discover what happens when you threaten people under human protection." On Thesha Prime, Kira TH continued to broadcast her plea into the void, unaware that her call for help had already been answered in a way that would change everything. The galaxy's most peaceful species had asked for assistance, and humanity's most dangerous protectors were already on their way. The Karn Raiders, drunk on their easy conquest, had no idea that they had just signed their own death warrants. They were about to learn that in the vast darkness of space, there were worse things than the void itself. They were about to meet the humans who emerged from the smoke. Colonel Marcus Havoc Rodriguez stood in the briefing room of the assault carrier Normandy as his officers filed in. The ship was already accelerating toward the Thesha system at maximum burn, its engines pushing the limits of human engineering. Around him, the cream of the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force prepared for what would become known as the Thesha intervention. "Listen up, Marines," Rodriguez began, his voice carrying the authority of 25 years of service. 18 hours ago, The Zalani Republic broadcast a distress call. Their homeworld is under attack by Karn raiders. Current intelligence suggests a force of approximately 50 vessels conducting systematic looting and destruction. Major Lisa Santos, commander of the 1st Battalion, raised her hand. Sir, what's our rules of engagement? The Zalani are pacifists. They might not appreciate a full military response. Rodriguez's expression softened slightly. He had worked with Zalani diplomats before and respected their commitment to peaceful solutions. But he also understood something they hadn't yet learned. Sometimes, peace could only be preserved through the willingness to fight for it. Our mission is simple, Major. We're going to save every Zalani life we can, stop the Karn raids permanently, and make sure this never happens again. As for the Zalani's feelings about our methods, he paused, his weathered face showing traces of the compassion that drove him to volunteer for this mission. We'll worry about their diplomatic concerns after we've made sure they're alive to voice them. The room erupted in quiet laughter and knowing nods. These Marines had served together long enough to understand their colonel's philosophy. Protect the innocent first, sort out the politics later. Sir, what do we know about Karn tactics? Asked Captain Jake Thompson, commander of the reconnaissance company. Rodriguez activated the holographic display, showing detailed intelligence reports compiled from previous Karn raids. They operate like parasites. Hit fast, overwhelm local defenses, grab everything valuable, and disappear before anyone can respond. They rely on speed and brutality to paralyze resistance. Their ships are fast but lightly armored. Their ground forces prefer intimidation over sustained combat. Sounds like they've never faced Marines before, observed Major Santos with a predatory smile. No, they haven't, Rodriguez confirmed. And that's going to be their fatal mistake. The Karn are about to discover the difference between raiding defenseless colonies and tangling with the human military. As the briefing continued, aboard the Normandy's sister ship Iwo Jima, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell was preparing her own forces. The 2nd Battalion specialized in urban warfare and civilian protection, skills that would be crucial in the densely populated cities of Thesha Prime. I want every squad leader to understand the cultural context, she told her assembled officers. The Zalani have never seen military action. They'll be terrified of us at first. Our job is to be their guardians, not their conquerors. Every civilian life saved is worth more than every raider eliminated. We're not here to win a war. We're here to end one. In the ship's armory, Gunnery Sergeant Mike Chun was supervising the preparation of specialized equipment. Non-lethal riot gear for crowd control, portable medical stations, universal translators, and humanitarian supplies were being loaded alongside the standard combat gear. Hey Gunny, why are we packing the medkits if we're just here to shoot bad guys? Asked Private Rodriguez, a young Marine on his first deployment. Chun paused in his inventory check and looked at the private with the patience of a 20-year veteran. Son, real Marines don't just shoot bad guys. Real Marines protect good people. Sometimes it means killing the enemy. Sometimes it means saving the innocent. Today, it means both. Back on Thesha Prime, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Karn had moved their ground forces into the capital's cultural district, where thousands of civilians had taken shelter in the ancient museums and libraries. Kira Th watched in horror from her diplomatic compound as smoke rose from the direction of the Grand Archive, a repository of knowledge that had taken millennia to assemble. Any responses to our distress call? Asked her aide, a young Zalani named Torval, whose normally pristine ceremonial robe were now stained with dust and tears. Many, Kira Th replied sadly. The Altarians are sending diplomats. The Centauri want to schedule meetings. The Rigelians are threatening trade sanctions. Everyone wants to help, but no one can help quickly enough. What about the humans? Torval asked. I've heard they're different from the other species, more direct in their approach to problems. Kira Th activated her communication console and scanned the responses again. There, buried among the diplomatic messages and bureaucratic delays, was a simple transmission from something called Terra Command. Message received, she read aloud. Help is on the way. Hold on. It wasn't much, but something about the brevity and confidence of the message stirred hope in her chest. She had heard rumors about human military capabilities, stories whispered in diplomatic circles about their intervention in various conflicts across the galaxy. Some called them aggressive. Others called them protectors. All agreed that when humans made a promise, they kept it. How long until they arrive? Torval asked. Kira TH checked the timestamp. The message was 6 hours old. I don't know, but something tells me we won't have to wait much longer. As if summoned by her words, the communication console erupted with new activity. Automated warnings, sensor alerts, and ship identification signals flooded the emergency frequencies. But these weren't Karn vessels. The energy signatures were different, more powerful, more organized. This is Colonel Rodriguez of the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force, United Earth Defense Command, came a voice over the emergency channel, speaking fluent Zilani. We're 12 hours out from Thesha Prime. Zilani leadership, please respond on secure frequency Delta 7. We're here to help. For the first time in 3 days, Kira TH allowed herself to smile. The humans weren't sending diplomats or observers or negotiators. They were sending soldiers. And somehow, that felt exactly like what her people needed. In space above Thesha Prime, Karn Raid Commander Vextar reviewed the latest intelligence reports from his flagship, the Bloodhawk. The Zilani resistance had been even weaker than expected. Their cities burned beautifully. Their treasures filled his cargo holds, and their people cowered before his warriors like prey animals before predators. Commander, we're receiving multiple transmissions on emergency frequencies, reported his communications officer. Various alien species offering diplomatic assistance to the Zilani. Vextar laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. Let them send their diplomats. By the time their bureaucrats finish talking, we'll be 3 systems away with enough loot to fund our clan for a generation. Sir, there's something else. We're detecting ship signatures approaching the system. Large vessels, military configuration. The raid commander's amusement faded. How large? What species? Unknown configuration, sir. But the energy readings suggest heavy assault vessels. Possibly human in origin. Vextar felt a chill run down his spine. Every raider in the galaxy had heard the stories about human military responses. Swift, brutal, decisive. The humans didn't negotiate with raiders or pirates. They simply eliminated them. How long until they arrive? Approximately 10 hours, sir. Vextar stared at the tactical display, his mind racing. His 47 ships were spread across the system, some in orbit, others on raiding missions to the outer colonies. Against a prepared human military force, he would need every advantage he could get. Signal all vessels, he ordered. Cease raiding operations immediately. I want every ship in defensive formation within 6 hours. And send a message to the surface teams. Tell them to round up as many Zilani civilians as possible. If the humans want to fight, they'll have to do it with innocent lives in the crossfire. As the Karn raiders scrambled to prepare their defenses, they had no way of knowing that their decision to use civilians as shields had just sealed their fate. The Marines approaching Thesha Prime specialized in exactly this type of situation. They had trained for years to fight in urban environments where every shot had to be precise, every movement calculated to protect innocent lives. The Karn had made their choice. Now the Marines would make theirs. And in 12 hours, the galaxy would witness what happened when humanity's most elite warriors emerged from the smoke to answer a desperate plea for help. The assault carrier Normandy dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Thesha system like a predator emerging from the shadows. Around it, the rest of the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force materialized in perfect formation. 3 assault carriers, 2 heavy cruisers, and a dozen escort vessels. Their dark hulls seemed to absorb the light from Thesha's sun, making them appear like holes torn in the fabric of space itself. On the Normandy's bridge, Colonel Rodriguez stood before the tactical display, studying the deployment of Karn forces throughout the system. His weathered face remained impassive, but his experienced eyes saw everything. The scattered raider vessels, the burning colonies on the outer moons, and, most importantly, the cluster of enemy ships in low orbit around Thesha Prime. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Karn commander," reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park, the ship's communications officer. "He wants to negotiate." Rodriguez's expression didn't change. "Put him through." The main screen flickered to life, revealing the scarred face of Raid Commander Vextar. The Karn leader's reptilian features were twisted in what humans might recognize as a calculating smile, though his dark eyes held barely concealed fear. "Human Commander," Vextar began, his voice carrying the artificial confidence of someone trying to control a situation spiraling beyond his grasp. "I am Vextar of the Bloodclaw clan. Perhaps we can reach an arrangement that benefits both our species." "I'm listening," Rodriguez replied, his tone neutral. "We have taken several thousand Zalani civilians into protective custody," the raider continued, his forked tongue flicking out nervously. "Their safety depends entirely on your next actions. Withdraw your forces, and these innocents will be released unharmed. Attack us, and their blood will be on your hands." Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, studying the alien commander's face. Around the bridge, his officers waited tensely for his response. They all knew their colonel well enough to recognize the dangerous stillness that had settled over him. "Commander Vextar," Rodriguez finally said, his voice carrying a weight that made even the hardened Marines on the bridge stand straighter. "I want to make sure I understand your position correctly. You've invaded a peaceful world, killed innocent civilians, destroyed their cities, and now you're threatening to murder hostages unless I let you continue." "That is a crude but accurate summary," Vextar replied, some of his confidence returning. "Your species has a reputation for protecting innocent life. Surely you won't sacrifice thousands of Zalani for the sake of punishing a few raiders." Rodriguez nodded slowly, as if considering the proposal. "You're right about one thing, Commander. Humans do value innocent life. In fact, we value it so much that we've developed very specific procedures for dealing with anyone who threatens it." The colonel turned to his tactical officer. "Major Chun, please transmit the Terran Accords on hostage situations to the Karn commander. I want him to understand exactly what he's just done." On the enemy ship, Vextar's communication officer quickly translated the incoming data stream. As the implications became clear, the raid commander's artificial confidence evaporated completely. "Colonel Rodriguez," he said, his voice now tight with genuine fear. "Perhaps we can reconsider our respective positions." "Too late for that," Rodriguez interrupted. "Article 7 of the Terran Accords is very clear. Any military force that uses civilian hostages as human shields has forfeited all rights to surrender, negotiation, or quarter. You just declared war on every innocent life in this system." The transmission cut off, leaving Vextar staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. Every raider in the galaxy knew about human military doctrine, but few believed the stories were entirely true. Now, facing the cold reality of that doctrine in action, they began to understand why human intervention was feared throughout pirate strongholds across 3 sectors. Aboard the Normandy, Rodriguez was already shifting into combat mode. "All vessels, this is Havoc 6. Execute Broken Arrow Protocol. I want every Karn ship that fires on civilians or attempts to harm hostages destroyed immediately. No warnings, no mercy, no exceptions." The bridge erupted in controlled activity as his orders were transmitted throughout the task force. Broken Arrow was humanity's most aggressive military doctrine, reserved for situations where enemy forces had placed innocent civilians in immediate mortal danger. It authorized Marines to use any level of force necessary to protect non-combatants, regardless of tactical considerations or potential casualties among enemy forces. "Sir, the Karn are moving their ships into defensive positions around the planet," reported the tactical officer. "They're using orbital stations and civilian infrastructure as cover." "Then we'll have to be surgical," Rodriguez replied grimly. "Launch all assault shuttles. I want boots on the ground within 30 minutes. And prep the orbital support platforms. If the Karn want to hide behind civilian targets, we'll show them what precision warfare really means. In the hangar bay of the Iwo Jima, Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell was conducting final equipment checks with her battalion. The Marines of the 2nd Battalion were humanities specialists in urban warfare and hostage rescue operations. Their gear reflected their mission: advanced body armor with integrated targeting systems, weapons capable of precision fire in crowded environments, and medical equipment designed for mass casualty situations. "Listen up, Marines," Mitchell announced over the hangar's communication system. "Intelligence indicates the Karn have consolidated their hostages in 3 main locations: the Grand Archive, the Cultural Center, and the Diplomatic Quarter. Each location has approximately 2,000 civilians under guard by an estimated 50 to 75 enemy combatants." She activated a holographic display showing the detailed layouts of each target building. "The Karn are counting on us being afraid to engage in close quarters with civilians present. They're about to learn that Marines don't abandon innocent people because the mission gets difficult. We train for this exact scenario." Sergeant First Class Maria Gonzalez, squad leader for Alpha Team, raised her hand. "Ma'am, what about civilian casualties during the assault?" Mitchell's expression hardened. "Unacceptable. Zero tolerance. Every civilian life is our responsibility. If you can't guarantee a clean shot, you don't take the shot. If you can't secure a hostage without risk, you call for backup. We have overwhelming force advantage and superior training. We use both to ensure every innocent person goes home alive." As the assault shuttles launched from the human ships, they looked like falling stars against the orange glow of Thesha Prime's burning atmosphere. But these weren't harbingers of destruction. They were angels of deliverance, carrying humanity's promise to protect the innocent regardless of the cost. On the planet's surface, Ambassador Kira watched the approaching human ships through her diplomatic compound's reinforced windows. The Karn had established a command post in the plaza outside her building, their weapons trained on the hundreds of Zalani civilians they had herded together like livestock. "Ambassador," whispered Torval, "the humans are coming, but there are so many innocents in danger. How can they possibly rescue everyone without terrible casualties?" Kira continued to watch the sky, where the first human assault shuttles were now visible as bright points of light, growing larger by the minute. She had studied human military history during her diplomatic training, learning about their interventions in conflicts across the galaxy. What she remembered most wasn't their firepower or their technology, but their absolute refusal to abandon innocent people to evil. "The humans have a saying," she replied softly. "They leave no one behind." Today, I think we're about to see what that really means. The first wave of human shuttles touched down in the hills outside the capital city, their engines sending up clouds of steam and debris. From their bellies emerged Marines in full combat gear, moving with the practiced efficiency of elite warriors who had trained for this exact mission hundreds of times. Gunnery Sergeant Chun led his reconnaissance team through the urban landscape, using the burning buildings and abandoned vehicles as cover. Their mission was simple but crucial: identify every civilian location, map every enemy position, and establish secure communication with any Zalani who could provide intelligence about the hostage sites. "Gunny, we've got eyes on the Cultural Center," reported Corporal Davis through the team's encrypted communication system. "Confirmed hostiles using civilian shields. I count approximately 60 Karn guards and at least 2,000 Zalani civilians in the main auditorium." Chun studied the building through his optical enhancers. The Karn had positioned themselves behind barricades constructed from museum displays and cultural artifacts, using the Zalani civilians as a living wall between themselves and any potential rescue attempt. "Roger that, Davis. Mark all hostile positions and begin detailed mapping. Command needs exact layouts for the precision strikes." Meanwhile, Major Santos was leading her battalion through the city's underground maintenance tunnels, following maps provided by Zalani engineers who had joined the human forces as volunteers. The tunnels would allow the Marines to approach the hostage sites without exposing themselves or the civilians to crossfire. These tunnels connect to all 3 target buildings, explained Veldar, a Zalani Public Works coordinator whose own family was among the hostages. But the car may have guards posted at the major access points. Then, we'll make our own access points, Santos replied, gesturing to the combat engineers following her team. Marines don't let locked doors stop them from saving innocent lives. As the human forces moved into position around the 3 hostage sites, Raid Commander Vextar was discovering that his defensive strategy had a fatal flaw. The humans weren't approaching like any military force he had ever encountered. Instead of massing for conventional assault, they were infiltrating from dozens of different vectors simultaneously, each team precisely coordinated to avoid civilian casualties while maximizing pressure on Karn positions. Commander, the humans have completely surrounded all 3 buildings, reported his tactical officer. But they're not attacking. They're just waiting. Vextar studied his tactical display with growing unease. Every instinct told him to demand immediate withdrawal by the human forces, but something about their precise deployment suggested they were far from finished with their preparations. Sir, incoming transmission from the human colonel. Rodriguez's face appeared on the screen again, but this time his expression held no trace of the diplomatic courtesy from their earlier conversation. This was the face of a Marine commander who had made his decision and would not be deterred. Commander Vextar, you have 60 seconds to release all civilian hostages and surrender your forces, he said with deadly calm. After that time expires, we will consider every Karn warrior in those buildings to be an active threat to innocent life. And if I refuse? Vextar demanded, though his voice lacked its earlier bravado. Then, you'll discover why humans are the only species in the galaxy that specializes in impossible rescues, Rodriguez replied. 60 seconds, Commander. Choose wisely. The transmission ended, leaving Vextar to stare at his tactical display. Around him, his officers waited for orders, but the raid commander found himself paralyzed by an impossible decision. Release the hostages, and his forces would be overwhelmed within minutes. Keep them, and face whatever the humans had planned. On Thesha Prime, 60 seconds felt like an eternity. In the Grand Archive, terrified Zalani civilians huddled together while their Karn captors grew increasingly nervous about the ominous silence outside. In the Cultural Center, families whispered prayers to deities both ancient and modern. In the Diplomatic Quarter, Ambassador Kira Th held Torval's hand and watched the chronometer count down to whatever the humans had planned. And in the tunnels beneath the city, on rooftops overlooking the target buildings, and in carefully concealed positions throughout the urban landscape, human Marines checked their equipment one final time and prepared to prove that when innocent lives hung in the balance, there was no such thing as an impossible mission. The countdown reached 0, and hell came to Thesha Prime in the form of angels with automatic weapons and hearts full of righteous fury. The assault began with surgical precision that defied the chaos of war itself. At exactly 14:47 local time, shaped charges detonated simultaneously in the basement levels of all 3 target buildings. The explosions were carefully calculated by human combat engineers to create entry points without compromising structural integrity or endangering the civilians held on upper floors. In the Grand Archive, Sergeant First Class Maria Gonzalez led Alpha Squad through the breach they had blown in the ancient building's foundation. The Zalani had constructed their greatest library from a naturally occurring crystal formation, and the Marines moved through tunnels that sparkled with bioluminescent minerals even as smoke from the charges drifted through the passages. Movement ahead, whispered Corporal Kim through the squad's tactical network. 2 hostiles, light armor, projectile weapons. Gonzalez held up her fist, stopping her team's advance. Through her helmet's enhanced optics, she could see the Karn guards positioned at the stairwell leading to the main library level. Above them, she knew, were nearly 2,000 Zalani civilians whose lives depended on her team's ability to eliminate threats without triggering a massacre. Rodriguez, Chun, flank left through the archive's storage area. she sub-vocalized into her communicator. Kim, Williams, with me up the center passage. Remember, these buildings are over 3,000 years old. Watch your firing angles. No ricochets, no structural damage. The Marines moved like ghosts through the crystal corridors, their advanced armor dampening sound, and their training allowing them to navigate the unfamiliar architecture with deadly efficiency. When they struck, it was with the coordinated precision of a surgical team rather than the brutal force typically associated with military operations. The first Karn guard died without knowing he was under attack. Lance Corporal Chen's suppressed rifle eliminated him with a single precise shot to the head, the specialized ammunition designed to expand on impact without overpenetration. The second guard had time to register his companion's death before Rodriguez's blade found his throat, ending his life in perfect silence. Alpha Squad, basement secure, Gonzalez reported. Moving to second level. Estimate 40-plus hostiles between us and the civilians. Meanwhile, in the cultural center, Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell was leading her own team through a different kind of hell. The Karn had fortified the building's main auditorium by destroying priceless Zalani artwork to create firing positions, positioning their hostages in the center of the space where any rescue attempt would require Marines to fight through innocent civilians to reach their targets. "This is why we train for the impossible," Mitchell murmured to her senior sergeant as they studied the tactical display showing the auditorium's layout. 47 hostiles using 2,000 civilians as human shields in an enclosed space with limited access points. "Ma'am, conventional assault doctrine says this can't be done without massive civilian casualties," replied Master Sergeant Torres, a 20-year veteran whose calm voice couldn't quite hide his concern. "Good thing Marines don't follow conventional doctrine," Mitchell replied with grim determination. "Break out the specialty equipment. If the Karn want to play with hostages, we'll show them what humans do to people who threaten innocence." Her team began unpacking weapons and equipment that existed nowhere else in the known galaxy. Humanity's development of hostage rescue technology had progressed far beyond anything other species considered possible, driven by their absolute refusal to accept civilian casualties as an inevitable cost of military operations. The centerpiece of their assault would be the crowd-control nanofoam dispensers, devices that could instantaneously create barriers between hostages and their captors while simultaneously providing protective cover for rescuing Marines. Combined with precisely targeted sonic disruptors and neural suppression fields, the technology would allow them to disable the Karn guards while leaving the Zalani civilians completely unharmed. "Torres, I want teams positioned at every possible exit," Mitchell ordered. "When we deploy the foam barriers, those hostiles are going to panic. Some will try to escape, others will try to take hostages with them. Neither option is acceptable." In the diplomatic quarter, the situation was more complex, but no less deadly. The Karn had chosen Ambassador Kiritich's compound specifically because of its symbolic value, knowing that attacking a diplomatic facility would carry political ramifications that might deter human intervention. They had not anticipated that Marines operating under Broken Arrow Protocol were authorized to treat diplomatic immunity as irrelevant when civilian lives were at stake. Captain Jake Thompson led his reconnaissance company through the compound's ornate gardens, moving between decorative sculptures and artistic installations that had been created to celebrate peaceful cooperation between species. The irony was not lost on him that he was preparing to commit acts of precise violence in a place designed to promote harmony. "Sir, we've identified the primary hostage location," reported Staff Sergeant Park through the tactical network. "They've got about 300 civilians in the main conference hall. Estimate 25 guards, but they're positioned for maximum intimidation rather than tactical advantage." Thompson studied the intelligence data streaming into his helmet display. The Karn had arranged their captives in a circle, forcing them to sit on the polished floor while guards walked among them with weapons drawn. It was psychological warfare designed to break the spirits of people who had never experienced violence, but it also created an opportunity for Marines trained in precision combat. "Mark every hostile position," he ordered. I want firing solutions that account for ricochets, collateral damage, and civilian panic responses. When we hit them, it has to be perfect. These people have never seen warfare. We can't let their first exposure to human military doctrine include watching their captors die messy deaths. Back in orbit, Colonel Rodriguez watched the tactical situation develop through real-time feeds from his ground teams. The Karn had made their choice to use civilians as shields, but they clearly didn't understand what that choice meant when facing human Marines. "Sir, all teams report ready for final assault," reported Major Santos through the command communication channel. Estimated time to complete hostage rescue across all 3 locations is 7 minutes. Rodriguez nodded grimly. 7 minutes to save nearly 5,000 innocent lives while eliminating enemy forces that had positioned themselves to make rescue impossible. Any other military force in the galaxy would have concluded the mission was unfeasible and begun negotiating with the hostage takers. But Marines didn't negotiate with people who threatened innocent lives. "All teams, this is Havoc 6, he transmitted to every Marine in the operation. Execute Guardian Angel Protocol. Bring our people home." The phrase Guardian Angel Protocol sent a chill through every human warrior involved in the operation. It was humanity's most sacred military doctrine, the promise that no innocent person would be abandoned to evil regardless of the cost. It authorized Marines to take any action necessary to protect civilian life, even if it meant accepting impossible odds or certain death. In the Grand Archive, Gonzalez's Alpha Squad had fought their way through 3 levels of Karn resistance, eliminating guards with surgical precision while avoiding damage to the building's priceless contents. Now, they faced the most difficult challenge, the main library level where the majority of hostages were held under heavy guard. "I count 32 hostiles in direct contact with civilians," reported Kim through the tactical network. "They've got the Zalani positioned as human shields around every defensive position." Gonzalez studied the situation through her helmet's tactical display. The Karn had learned from their losses on the lower levels and adapted their defensive strategy to maximize civilian casualties in any rescue attempt. But they had underestimated the capabilities of Marines equipped with humanity's most advanced combat technology. "Deploy the Halo rounds," she ordered. Her team loaded specialized ammunition that represented the pinnacle of human military engineering. Each round contained micro-guidance systems that could alter trajectory mid-flight, allowing Marines to fire around obstacles, curve shots between innocent civilians, and strike targets from angles that defied conventional ballistics. When the shooting started, it looked like magic to the terrified Zalani civilians. Marine weapons fired in seemingly random directions, but their rounds curved through the air with impossible precision, striking Karn guards with lethal accuracy while never coming closer than 3 feet to any innocent person. The entire engagement lasted 47 seconds. When it ended, 32 enemy combatants lay dead, and 2,000 Zalani civilians remained unharmed in the middle of what had been a deadly crossfire. At the cultural center, Mitchell's deployment of crowd control technology created a scene that would later be described as impossible by military analysts from across the galaxy. The nanofoam barriers materialized in precise patterns that separated every Karn guard from their hostages while providing protective cover for the incoming Marines. The Karn found themselves isolated in small pockets, unable to threaten civilians and facing human warriors who had trained specifically for close-quarters combat in populated areas. The neural suppression fields ensured that even wounded enemies couldn't trigger explosive devices or activate deadman switches that might harm innocents. "Hostile elimination complete," Mitchell reported as her Marines secured the auditorium. 2,000 civilians safe and secured. 0 friendly casualties, 0 civilian casualties. The speed and precision of the operation defied everything the Karn had believed about urban warfare. They had positioned themselves in a way they thought made rescue impossible, only to discover that Marines defined impossible very differently than other species. In a diplomatic quarter, Captain Thompson's team had executed what would later be called the most precise hostage rescue in galactic history. Using advanced targeting systems and specialized ammunition, they simultaneously eliminated 25 guards positioned among 300 hostages in a space no larger than a residential dining room. The key to their success was the Marines' absolute faith in their training and equipment. Each shot was calculated not just for accuracy, but for psychological impact on both rescued civilians and watching enemies. The Zilani needed to see that human intervention meant safety and protection. The car needed to understand that threatening innocence would result in swift, inevitable death. All stations, this is Guardian Angel Control, Rodriguez announced as reports flooded in from all 3 sites. Mission accomplished. 4,857 civilians rescued. 0 friendly casualties. 0 civilian casualties. All hostile forces eliminated or captured. But even as the immediate rescue operation succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, the larger battle for Thesha Prime was just beginning. The ground-based Karn forces had been dealt with, but 47 Raider ships remained in orbit, their commanders now fully aware that their hostage strategy had failed catastrophically. Raid Commander Vextar stared at his tactical display in disbelief. In less than 20 minutes, the humans had accomplished what every military expert in the galaxy would have declared impossible. They had successfully rescued hostages from multiple heavily defended positions without losing a single civilian life. "Commander, the humans are demanding our complete surrender," reported his communications officer. "They're offering to accept the crew's surrender if we abandon our ships and submit to capture." Vextar felt the weight of absolute defeat settling on his shoulders. His ground forces were eliminated, his hostages were freed, and his fleet was facing human warships that had just demonstrated capabilities beyond anything he had imagined possible. But surrender was not in the Karn nature. They were raiders, predators who lived by taking what they wanted from those too weak to resist. The idea of submitting to human justice was more terrifying than the prospect of death in battle. "Signal all ships," he ordered with desperate determination. "We make for the outer system. If we can reach hyperspace, we can escape to fight another day." It was the final mistake in a day full of fatal errors. The Karn had yet to discover what happened when humans decided that running away was not an acceptable option for people who had threatened innocent lives. The Karn fleet's desperate attempt to escape became a masterclass in why humanity had earned its reputation as the galaxy's most ruthless protectors of innocent life. As Raid Commander Vextar's 47 ships accelerated toward the outer system, they found themselves facing a tactical situation that no Raider force had ever encountered. Human warships operating under a doctrine that classified their escape as unacceptable. Admiral Richardson had not sent the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force alone. Trailing behind the assault carriers by 6 hours were elements of the Sole Defense Fleet's hunter-killer squadrons, ships specifically designed to ensure that threats to innocent life could not simply withdraw to terrorize other worlds. "Contact the Normandy." Admiral Richardson commanded from her flagship, the heavy cruiser Retribution. "Tell Colonel Rodriguez that his Marines performed magnificently. Now it's our turn to make sure these raiders never threaten anyone again." The space battle that followed would be studied in military academies for generations, not for its scale, but for its demonstration of how technological superiority combined with moral clarity could create seemingly impossible tactical advantages. Captain Sarah Chun, commanding the destroyer Vigilant, led her squadron in a high-speed intercept course that brought them into contact with the fleeing Karn vessels just as they reached the system's outer asteroid field. The raiders had hoped to use the dense debris field to break up human formations and escape in the chaos, but they had underestimated human sensor technology and tactical coordination. Multiple contacts bearing 27 Mark III reported Lieutenant Commander Parr from the Vigilance tactical station. 47 vessels in loose formation, attempting to use asteroid cover to mask their escape vector. Chun studied her tactical display with the calm precision of an officer who had spent 15 years hunting pirates and raiders across 3 sectors. They're running scared, which makes them predictable. Signal the task force. Implement Shepard's web formation. I want every possible escape route covered. The human ships moved with choreographed precision, positioning themselves to create an inescapable net around the fleeing raiders. Unlike the chaotic pursuit tactics favored by most military forces, human doctrine emphasized patience and overwhelming preparation over immediate action. Captain, the lead Karn vessels are changing course toward the jump point, reported the sensor operator. They're pushing their engines past safety limits. Let them run, Chen replied calmly. The harder they push their engines, the easier they'll be to track when they break down. And they will break down. Karn ships aren't built for sustained high-acceleration flight. Her prediction proved accurate within minutes. The first Karn vessel suffered catastrophic engine failure as its antiquated power systems overloaded under maximum stress. The ship tumbled helplessly in space, its crew faced with the choice of surrender or death in the cold vacuum. But surrender was not an option Admiral Richardson was prepared to offer. The Karn had threatened civilian hostages, destroyed peaceful communities, and demonstrated their willingness to target innocent life for profit. Under human military doctrine, such actions forfeited their right to continued existence. All vessels, this is Admiral Richardson, came the transmission that would later be quoted in discussions of human warfare ethics throughout the galaxy. The enemy has committed crimes against innocent civilian populations. No quarter will be given. No prisoners will be taken. Eliminate every raider vessel. Leave none alive to threaten other worlds. The order sent shockwaves through the alien observers monitoring the battle from distant systems. Most spacefaring civilizations maintained complex protocols for accepting enemy surrender, treating prisoners of war, and conducting post-conflict negotiations. Humanity's approach was radically different. Those who threatened innocent life faced complete annihilation. Aboard the destroyer Vigilant, Captain Chun felt no conflict about her orders. She had seen the aftermath of Karn raids on human colonies, had witnessed the burned settlements, and traumatized survivors left behind by these same raiders. The choice between mercy for pirates and protection for innocents was no choice at all. Weapons free, she announced to her crew. Target the disabled vessel first. Full spread, no warning shots. The Vigilant's particle beams lanced out across space, striking the crippled Karn ship with surgical precision. The raider vessel disintegrated in a brilliant flash of light that briefly outshone the distant sun, taking its crew of 63 pirates to whatever judgment awaited them beyond life. 1 down, 46 to go, Chen reported to her task force. All vessels, engage at will. Remember, these are not prisoners of war. These are criminals who held innocent civilians at gunpoint. Treat them accordingly. The battle that followed was less a combat engagement than an execution. The human ships moved through the asteroid field like angels of vengeance, their superior technology and training allowing them to pick apart the fleeing raiders with methodical precision. Commander Torres, leading a squadron of fighters from the carrier Lexington, coordinated strikes against the smaller Karn vessels that attempted to hide among the asteroids. His pilots had trained extensively for combat in debris fields, learning to use the obstacles as both cover and weapons. Flight leader, I've got 3 bandits trying to use Asteroid 7 Alpha as cover, reported Lieutenant Kim through the squadron's tactical network. They think they're hidden. Torres smiled grimly inside his fighter's cockpit. Negative, too. They think they're hidden. Show them the difference. Kim's fighter launched a spread of guided missiles that used the asteroid's gravitational fields to curve around the debris, striking the hidden Karn ships from angles they had thought impossible. The raiders died without understanding how human weapons had reached them through solid rock. Clean kills on all 3 targets, Kim reported. These pirates really don't understand what they're dealing with. The truth was that few species in the galaxy truly understood human military capabilities. Most civilizations developed their warfare doctrines around territorial disputes, resource conflicts, or political disagreements between roughly equal opponents. Humanity was unique in developing military technology specifically designed to protect innocent life from those who would prey upon it. Every weapon system, every tactical doctrine, every piece of equipment carried by human forces had been designed with one primary goal: ensuring that evil could not triumph over good through superior firepower alone. The result was a military force that seemed almost supernatural in its ability to achieve impossible objectives when innocent lives were at stake. Raid Commander Vextar watched his fleet die around him with the growing realization that he had made a fatal error in choosing to target the Zilani. The humans weren't simply another military force to be avoided or bargained with. They were something far more dangerous, a species that had weaponized their compassion for innocent life. "Commander, we're down to 12 vessels," reported his tactical officer, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "The humans are picking us off systematically. Their targeting systems are beyond anything we've encountered. Signal the remaining ships," Vextar ordered desperately. "Full scatter pattern. Maybe some of us can escape if we split up." But even as he gave the order, he knew it was futile. The human ships moved with a coordination that suggested they had anticipated every possible escape attempt. Each time a Karn vessel broke from the main group, human fighters appeared from seemingly nowhere to eliminate it with surgical precision. Captain Chin watched the raiders' desperate maneuvers with professional interest. "They're finally starting to understand the situation," she observed to her tactical officer. "But it's too late. They should have thought about the consequences before they decided to threaten innocent civilians." "Ma'am, the command ship is trying to reach the outer jump point," Lieutenant Commander Park reported. "If they make the hyperspace transition, they could escape." "Not acceptable," Chin replied firmly. "Signal the retribution. Request permission to engage with full ship batteries." Admiral Richardson's response came immediately. "Permission granted, Vigilant." In this, the heavy cruiser Retribution moved into position like a predator claiming its territory. Her massive weapons batteries, designed for ship-to-ship combat against heavily armored opponents, could destroy a Karn raider with a single shot. But Richardson wanted to send a message that would resonate throughout pirate strongholds across 3 sectors. "Target the command ship's engines," she ordered. "I want them crippled but alive long enough to watch the rest of their fleet die." The Retribution's main guns spoke with the voice of righteous judgment, sending streams of coherent energy across millions of kilometers of space to strike Vextar's flagship with precision that defied the laws of physics as most species understood them. The Karn ship's engines exploded in brilliant cascades of light, leaving the vessel tumbling helplessly in space. Vextar found himself trapped in the command center of a dead ship, watching through his tactical display as the humans methodically eliminated the last of his fleet. His raiders died one by one, their ships reduced to expanding clouds of debris and energy that briefly illuminated the dark space between worlds. "This is impossible," he whispered to himself, his reptilian features twisted with disbelief. "No military force in the galaxy operates like this. They're not following any civilized rules of warfare." What Vextar failed to understand was that humans didn't consider warfare against those who threatened innocent life to be civilized by definition. When pirates, raiders, or terrorists chose to target peaceful populations, they forfeited their right to civilized treatment and faced instead the full weight of humanity's protective instincts. "Sir, that's the last of them," reported the sensor operator aboard the Vigilant. "All hostile vessels destroyed except for the command ship." Shin nodded with satisfaction. "Signal Admiral Richardson. Recommend we leave the command ship intact as evidence. The galaxy should see what happens to those who threaten innocent life under human protection." On the surface of Thesha Prime, Ambassador Kiritich stood among the rescued civilians in the Grand Archive, watching through the crystal windows as lights flashed in the space above her world. Each brief flare represented the death of a Karn raider, the elimination of a threat that would never again terrorize peaceful worlds. "Ambassador, the human colonel is requesting permission to land at the capital spaceport," reported Torval, who had become the unofficial coordinator between Zalani authorities and their human protectors. He wants to meet with you personally. Kira TH felt a complex mixture of emotions as she considered the implications of that meeting. The humans had saved her people, demonstrated military capabilities beyond anything she had imagined possible, and done it all without asking for anything in return. But they had also brought a level of violence to her peaceful world that challenged everything the Zalani believed about conflict resolution. Tell Colonel Rodriguez he is welcome on Thesha Prime, she decided, and prepare the council chamber for a formal reception. After what these humans have done for us, the least we can do is thank them properly. As the last flashes of light faded from the space above Thesha Prime, the galaxy began to absorb the implications of what had just occurred. The most peaceful species in known space had called for help, and humanity had answered with a demonstration of military precision that redefined what most civilizations thought possible. But the story was not yet over. The humans had saved the Zalani and eliminated the immediate threat, but they had also made a statement that would echo across every criminal organization in 3 sectors. The message was simple, direct, and utterly terrifying in its implications. Threaten innocent life under human protection, and face extinction. 3 days after the last Karn Raider died in the cold vacuum above Thesha Prime, Colonel Rodriguez walked through the halls of the Grand Archive with Ambassador Kiritich, surrounded by evidence of both destruction and salvation. The ancient crystal walls still bore scorch marks from the battle, but they also reflected the grateful faces of thousands of Zalani civilians who had lived through what should have been their final hours. Colonel, I must confess something that troubles my conscience, Kira TH said as they paused before a memorial wall listing the names of Zalani who had died in the initial Karn attack. When we transmitted our plea for help, we expected diplomats, peacekeepers, perhaps humanitarian aid workers. We never imagined that our call would bring warriors capable of such precision in violence. Rodriguez studied the memorial, noting that the list contained 1,247 names. Each represented a life lost before human intervention could prevent it, a failure that weighed heavily on his shoulders despite the logical impossibility of arriving sooner. Ambassador, with respect, your people called for assistance. You didn't specify what kind of assistance you needed, he replied quietly. Sometimes the best diplomacy happens after someone makes sure there are still people left alive to negotiate. But the speed, the efficiency with which your Marines eliminated threats while preserving innocent life. Kira TH shook her head in wonder. Our military analysts are saying it should have been impossible. How do humans train for such scenarios? Rodriguez turned to face the Zalani diplomat, his weathered features soft with compassion, but his eyes holding the steel that had made him legendary among those who knew his reputation. We train for impossible scenarios because we've learned that evil rarely presents itself in convenient packages, he explained. The moment we decide that civilian casualties are acceptable, we become the kind of people we're supposed to be protecting innocents from. So we don't accept them. Ever. They continued walking through the archive, passing Zalani scholars who were carefully cataloging which cultural treasures had survived the raid. The Marines had managed to save not just lives, but also much of the irreplaceable knowledge stored within these crystal halls. Your forces could have used much heavier weapons, Kira TH observed. The tactical reports suggest you deliberately chose equipment that would minimize collateral damage to our buildings and cultural artifacts. Marines don't just save people, Ambassador. We save what makes people worth saving, Rodriguez replied. Art, knowledge, culture, hope. That's what civilization really is. Anyone can destroy. It takes something special to preserve. In the medical center that human corpsmen had established in the cultural center, Dr. Sarah Kim was treating the last of the psychological trauma cases among the rescued hostages. The Zalani had no previous experience with warfare, and many were struggling to process what they had witnessed during their captivity and rescue. The interesting thing about your species, she told Veldar, the public work coordinator who had helped guide Marines through the tunnel systems, is that you've managed to build a civilization based on pure cooperation. No standing military, no weapons production, no defense industry. It's actually remarkable. But it left us helpless when evil arrived, Veldar replied sadly. Perhaps we were naive to think the galaxy was a safer place than it truly is. Dr. Kim shook her head firmly. You weren't naive. You were optimistic. And optimism is what makes life worth protecting. The galaxy needs species like yours to remind the rest of us what we're fighting for. But now we know the cost of our pacifism, Veldar said. Those 1,247 names on the memorial wall represent people who died because we couldn't defend ourselves. Those people died because raiders chose to kill them, Dr. Kim corrected gently. Evil is always responsible for its own actions. Your people's commitment to peace didn't create the Karn threat. It just meant you needed help dealing with it when it arrived. Meanwhile, in the diplomatic compound that had served as one of the hostage sites, Ambassador Kira was hosting an unprecedented gathering. Representatives from across the galaxy had arrived to witness the aftermath of human military intervention and try to understand the implications for their own worlds. The Altarian ambassador, a tall, ethereal being whose species prided itself on sophisticated diplomatic solutions, stood before the reconstructed conference room where 300 Zalani had been held at gunpoint just days earlier. Ambassador Kira, the Altarian Confederacy is prepared to offer significant resources for Thesha Prime's reconstruction, he announced formally. We also wish to establish a permanent peacekeeping presence to prevent future incidents. Before Kira could respond, Colonel Rodriguez spoke from his position near the room's entrance. That's generous, Ambassador, but I think you're missing the point. The Zalani don't need peacekeepers. They need the knowledge that anyone who threatens them will face consequences they can't survive. The Altarian turned to study the human officer with barely concealed disdain. Colonel, surely you're not suggesting that military force is preferable to diplomatic solutions? I'm suggesting that diplomatic solutions work best when everyone at the table knows that violence against innocents will result in swift, total retribution, Rodriguez replied calmly. The Karn didn't attack Thesha Prime because diplomacy failed. They attacked because they thought the consequences would be acceptable. And now, asked the Centauri representative, a heavy-set being whose species controlled significant commercial shipping routes. Now every raider organization in 3 sectors knows that the Zalani are under human protection, Rodriguez said with quiet certainty. They'll find easier targets elsewhere, or they'll find different careers entirely. The truth of his words was already becoming apparent across the galaxy. Within hours of the Thesha intervention, as historians would later call it, criminal organizations throughout known space began reassessing their target lists. The complete annihilation of the Bloodclaw clan had sent shockwaves through pirate strongholds, slaver networks, and raider fleets everywhere. Captain Sarah Chun, now commanding a patrol squadron in the Thesha system, was monitoring intelligence reports about the criminal response to human intervention. Ma'am, Signals intelligence indicates significant movement among pirate fleets in the Vega sector, reported Lieutenant Commander Park. They're consolidating forces and moving away from systems with human populations or human allies. Chen nodded with satisfaction. Good. Fear is a powerful deterrent when it's properly applied. How many raider organizations have disbanded since Thesha? 14 confirmed, ma'am. Another 27 have shifted their operations to sectors without human presence. And civilian casualties from pirate attacks in our area of responsibility? Down 63%, Captain. It seems word is spreading that attacking innocents brings unwanted attention from human military forces. The strategic implications of the Thesha intervention extended far beyond a single rescue mission. Humanity had demonstrated to the galaxy that they possessed both the capability and the will to project overwhelming force in defense of innocent life. The psychological impact of that demonstration was reshaping criminal behavior patterns across multiple star systems. But The most significant change was happening among the peaceful species who had previously felt vulnerable to predators like the Karn. The Zilani Council had voted unanimously to request formal alliance status with Earth, marking the first time in their species' history that they had sought military partnership with another civilization. We understand now that pacifism without protection is merely an invitation to victimization, Ambassador Kiritich explained to Colonel Rodriguez during their final meeting before his departure. The Zilani people wish to contribute to the safety of other peaceful worlds, but we need human guidance on how to do so without compromising our fundamental values. Rodriguez considered her words carefully. The human approach to galactic affairs had always been complicated by their unique position as both protectors and warriors. Most species saw those roles as contradictory, but humans understood them as inseparable. Ambassador, the most important thing your people can do is remain exactly who you are, he said finally. The galaxy needs species that remember what peace looks like, what civilization can accomplish when it's not constantly defending itself from predators. Humans can handle the ugly work of dealing with those predators. But that seems unfair to your people, Kiritich protested. Why should humans bear the burden of violence so that species like mine can remain pure? Because someone has to, Rodriguez replied simply. And we've discovered that we're very good at it. More importantly, we've discovered that we can live with the moral weight of necessary violence in ways that species like yours cannot. As the human task force prepared to depart Thesha Prime, leaving behind only a small garrison to ensure the planet's continued security, the broader galactic community was still struggling to process what they had witnessed. The Rigelian Trade Federation had proposed economic sanctions against any system that harbored raiders or pirates. The Altarian Confederacy was developing new diplomatic protocols for rapid intervention in humanitarian crises. The Centauri Assembly was debating the creation of a galaxy-wide peacekeeping force modeled on human military doctrine. But perhaps the most telling response came from the Vorth Empire, a militaristic civilization that had previously viewed humans as potential rivals. Their ambassador to the Galactic Council delivered a speech that would be quoted for generations. The humans have demonstrated something that military strategists throughout the galaxy thought impossible: the complete integration of compassionate objectives with overwhelming tactical superiority. They have shown us that there is no contradiction between protecting innocent life and annihilating those who threaten it. This is not weakness disguised as strength, or strength disguised as weakness. This is something entirely new in galactic affairs, moral clarity backed by unlimited capability. On the final day of human presence on Thesha Prime, a ceremony was held in the restored Grand Archive. Representatives from dozens of species had gathered to witness the formal signing of the Thesha Accords, a document that would establish the template for human protective alliances throughout the galaxy. Today we recognize a fundamental truth, Ambassador Kiritich announced to the assembled delegates. Evil exists in the galaxy, and it will always seek to prey upon those who cannot defend themselves. But we also recognize that good exists, and that sometimes good must be armed, trained, and prepared to act with decisive force when innocent life is threatened. Colonel Rodriguez stood to address the gathering, his dress uniform bearing the medals and decorations of a career spent protecting others. Around him, diplomatic protocols that had been developed over millennia of galactic civilization struggled to accommodate the reality of human military philosophy. The promise humanity makes to its allies is simple, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the crystal halls. We will come when you call. We will arrive prepared for the worst-case scenario. We will accept no casualties among innocent civilians. And we will ensure that those who threaten you face consequences they cannot survive, escape, or negotiate away from. But what does humanity ask in return for such protection? Inquired the Altarian ambassador. Rodriguez smiled, the expression transforming his battle-hardened features. Nothing, ambassador. The opportunity to protect innocent life is its own reward. Humans don't become Marines for profit or glory. We become Marines because someone has to stand between good people and the darkness that wants to destroy them. As the ceremony concluded and the various ambassadors prepared to carry news of the Thesha intervention back to their home worlds, Ambassador Kira Th found herself standing alone with Colonel Rodriguez in the memorial hall. "Colonel, I have one final question," she said quietly. "When my people transmitted our plea for assistance, when we called out into the darkness hoping someone would answer, how did you know we were worth saving?" Rodriguez looked at the wall bearing the names of the 1,247 Zalani who had died before human help could arrive. Each name represented a life cut short, a potential unrealized, a future stolen by those who valued profit over mercy. "Ambassador, the question isn't how we knew you were worth saving," he replied softly. "The question is how anyone could think you weren't. Your people spent 3,000 years building a civilization based on knowledge, art, and peaceful cooperation. You created beauty where others saw only resources to exploit. You chose hope where others chose fear." He turned to face her, his eyes holding the weight of absolute conviction. "When innocent people call for help, Marines answer. It's not about politics or profit or strategic advantage. It's about the simple recognition that some things are worth fighting for, and some things are worth dying to protect. Today, the galaxy learned that lesson. Tomorrow, fewer innocents will suffer because of it." As the human ships departed Thesha Prime, they left behind more than just a rescued planet. They had delivered a message that would echo across the stars for generations to come. Humanity had heard the desperate plea for assistance, and they had emerged from the smoke with an answer written in fire and steel. The galaxy would never be quite the same, and for countless innocent lives yet to be born, that was exactly as it should be. In the vast darkness of space, where civilizations rise and fall like distant stars, there now existed a new truth that every species would learn. When evil threatened the innocent, when hope seemed lost, when the darkness pressed too close to the light, someone would answer. Someone always answered, and they wore the uniform of the United Earth Defense Force, carried weapons designed to preserve rather than destroy, and bore the sacred promise that no innocent life would be abandoned to evil while they drew breath. They were Marines, and they kept their promises.